Warning! This show contains opinions, sarcasm, and enough facts to upset your HR department. Listener discretion is advised. Side effects may include laughter, head nods, and the sudden urge to check where your 401k is really invested.
America's culture machine has been running on 3 letters for a while. E, S, and G, with a side of D, E, and I. But 2025 just handed both sets a reality check. For the first time in 6 years, 0 environmental shareholder proposals passed this proxy season. Investor support cratered, proxy advisors pulled back, and the big dogs suddenly remembered they're supposed to care about returns. Meanwhile, universities across the country are scaling back or disguising DEI offices under political and legal heat. So tonight we're asking, is this a course correction toward merit and sanity? Let's meet the crew. First up, Brian. The man who treats common sense like a national treasure and brisket like a religion. He spent his weekend fact-checking ESG pamphlets with a meat thermometer and concluded both were undercooked. America's resident profit over posturing guy. Next, Rachel, the independent who can spot political theater from a mile away. She brings balance, receipts, and the kind of eyebrow raise that makes congressional staffers reconsider their talking points. Over on my left, Daniel, the conspiracy cartographer who can connect a proxy vote in Delaware to a think tank in Davos using only red yarn and caffeine. He brought a flowchart titled ESG, Everyone Subsidizing Government. And rounding it out, Skylar, our progressive voice who believes worker rights and clean air don't have to be punchlines. They come with policy, passion, and reusable containers. Brought to you by the Rourke thriller series, with the Covenant Protocol, the Prophet Directive, and Book 3. Black Echo Rising coming this December. Freedom isn't given, it's fought for. Grab the books on Amazon. Fuel the fight with our Bitterroot Coffee Blend. Dark French roast with a strong finish, roasted in the USA. And yes, the merch shop's open. Data Dissonance. Printify.me/. Brian, let's hit the big headline. 0 environmental proposals passed this proxy season. The first time in 6 years. After years of pushing ESG like it was gospel, investor support cratered and the big funds quietly backed away. What does that tell you about where the culture and the capital are heading right now?
It tells me that common sense finally walked back into the room. For years, Wall Street elites were treating retirees' money like poker chips in a green casino, chasing climate fantasies that had no chance of producing returns. This year, when the numbers came in, support for those ESG resolutions collapsed to single digits. That's not just investors being cautious. That's investors saying, stop lighting my money on fire to make yourself feel virtuous. Real workers, the ones relying on pensions and 401ks, they don't want slogans, they want security. This was a reality check. Build value, not virtue signals.
Single-digit support? Even my fantasy football team drafts better than that, and I once picked a kicker in round 5. Follow up, Brian. BlackRock, the big dog, just cut ties with some of the climate coalitions. Texas took them off the boycott list, and suddenly they're acting like they never got the ESG memo. Do you think that's genuine conviction or just political blowtorch pressure finally melting the ice?
Pressure works, plain and simple. When a state like Texas looks you in the eye and says, play stupid games with our money and we'll pull billions in contracts, suddenly the world's biggest asset manager remembers what fiduciary duty means. BlackRock didn't have a change of heart. They had a change of math. They realized virtue signaling isn't worth losing access to massive public funds. That's not courage, it's survival. And it proves states have power if they're willing to use it.
Nothing teaches Wall Street humility faster than a governor holding a giant red pen over their contract renewals. Suddenly, the climate sermon turns into, we're just here for the yield. Last one for you, Brian. If ESG is on ice, does that actually change the economy for everyday Americans? Or are we just swapping out buzzwords on press releases?
Short term, it slows down the worst nonsense. The forced divestments from reliable energy, the pressure campaigns against companies that actually produce value. Long term, it could redirect capital back toward industries that power the country instead of subsidizing pipe dreams. Will companies still try to sneak buzzwords into their reports? Sure. But when investors finally punish them for chasing hashtags instead of returns, the culture shifts. If this sticks, Americans should see more investment in the industries that keep lights on and trucks moving, not just the ones that generate applause on LinkedIn.
All right, the Ribs and Returns Caucus has spoken. Rachel, slice this one from the center. What's real risk? What's just window dressing? Investors just rejected every green proposal on the ballot. But that doesn't mean climate risk magically disappears. How do you separate genuine risk management from culture war fluff?
The key is asking what actually impacts operations versus what looks good in a glossy report. If a factory is in a flood zone, that's a genuine risk. If a utility can't keep transformers from overheating in record summers, that's a material problem. But when boards waste time on social wish lists that have no bearing on business performance, investors should, and did, slam the brakes. ESG wasn't all nonsense, but too much of it drifted into performance art. Companies need to go back to the basics, measure what matters, disclose what's real, and stop treating activism as a business strategy.
Right, so fewer TED Talks, more transformers that don't explode in July. Seems fair. Next up, DEI on campus. Universities are scaling back, renaming or outright dismantling DEI offices under legal and political pressure. Some reports even say they're disguising the programs under different titles to keep funding flowing. Is this reform or just rebrand?
It's both. Some schools are genuinely pulling back because the legal environment makes old DEI models unsustainable. Others are just changing labels, trying to ride out the storm while keeping the same frameworks in place. The responsible path forward is narrow. Protect equal opportunity and ensure discrimination isn't tolerated, while ditching the ideological litmus tests that turned DEI into a culture war lightning rod. When DEI focuses on fairness, it can serve a purpose. When it drifts into activism, it becomes poison for trust. Right now, we're watching institutions scramble to figure out which side of that line they want to land on.
So basically, some schools are doing spring cleaning, and others are just shoving the mess into a new closet labeled Office of Student Belongingness Excellence. Last one, Rachel. Do ordinary workers or students actually feel any of this in their daily lives? Or is it all just boardroom karaoke?
They feel it when policy shifts start showing up on their paychecks or their classrooms. If a company stops spending on empty ESG programs and starts investing in productivity, workers might see raises, training, or better hiring practices. If universities focus on equal treatment instead of ideological workshops, students feel less pressured and more supported. The trick is turning cultural course corrections into tangible benefits. Otherwise, it really is just karaoke with buzzwords. Catchy, but pointless.
Amen to that. Fewer buzzwords, more W2 theology. Daniel, break out the yarn. Connect these dots for us. Daniel, proposals flop, states sue, proxy advisors retreat, and campuses quietly rename DEI offices. Is this a spontaneous correction or coordinated pressure from the ground up?
This is pressure with a capital P. Investors didn't just wake up and see the light. They got sued, probed, and politically hammered. States like Texas turned up the heat, lawsuits threatened advisors, and suddenly the ESG parade hit a brick wall. That's not organic change, that's survival instinct. The elites will always virtue signal until it costs them. What changed in 2025 is that states and lawsuits finally made it expensive to keep pretending. So yes, it's a correction, but only because someone finally held the whip.
Nothing like a subpoena to turn a heartfelt, we care about the planet into we're reevaluating our strategies effective immediately. Zoom out for me, Daniel. Is ESG basically just outsourced politics? A way to push policy without winning elections?
Exactly. ESG was never about risk. It was about laundering ideology through corporate boardrooms. Couldn't pass Green New Deal through Congress? Fine, pressure banks, funds, and corporations to do it by proxy. It's politics in disguise, a way to change culture and industry without public consent. And DEI works the same way in education, ideological enforcement under the banner of fairness. Both acronyms were Trojan horses, shiny packaging, hidden agenda. The only reason they've slowed down is because voters, states, and lawsuits finally ripped the wrapping paper off.
Trojan horses, huh? That explains why half the ESG reports read like they were written in ancient Greek. Last one, Daniel. DEI's retreat. Do you buy it as sincere reform? Or is this just camouflage until the heat dies down?
Mostly camouflage. Institutions don't give up power voluntarily. They rename, restructure, and relabel to buy time. But the ideological roots remain. As long as the funding pipelines flow, the programs will persist under different names. Real reform only happens if oversight continues and budgets get cut. If not, we'll be right back here in 5 years talking about some new acronym that means the same thing.
All right, watchdog mode, engaged. Daniel says check the budgets, not the branding. Skylar, I'll give you the last word before Brian starts a GoFundMe for charcoal. Skylar, critics are high-fiving the zero for 2025 climate proposal tally, but real risks like flooding, heat waves, and worker safety don't vanish. What's the pro-worker, pro-reality case for smart standards that aren't just performative?
The pro-worker case is simple. Measure what actually affects jobs and pensions. If flooding knocks out a factory, that's material. If extreme heat shuts down a power grid, that's material. Real disclosures and real planning protect both workers and investors. The problem with ESG wasn't the idea of managing risk, it was the overreach into politics and ideology. Smart standards mean boards focus on keeping plants running and jobs secure, not on checking boxes that make headlines but add no value. Workers need real protections, not press releases.
So fewer climate manifestos, more air conditioners that don't melt down in July. Got it. Campus DEI has been under fire too. You've defended worker rights and equal opportunity before. What's worth saving from DEI without drifting into politics class 101?
What's worth saving is the principle of equal treatment. Anti-discrimination, fair admissions, support for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, those are good, necessary goals. Where DEI lost the plot was when it turned into ideological litmus tests and endless training sessions that divided rather than united. Keep the fairness, ditch the dogma, make sure people feel like the playing field is even, but stop using bureaucracies as political enforcement arms. Done right, fairness builds trust. Done wrong, it fuels backlash. That's the crossroads we're at.
Fairness without the PowerPoint marathons. I can get behind that. Half the DEI slide decks I've seen could double as Ambien. Last one, Skylar. What do you say to folks cheering that ESG is dead and buried?
I'd say don't confuse bad ideas dying with risk management disappearing. Climate risk is still real, worker safety still matters, and investors still need transparency. What should die is the grandstanding and the politics. What should stay is the discipline of measuring real risks and protecting real people. If the retreat in 2025 becomes a reset, less fluff, more focus, then workers, investors, and students all win. But if we just gloat and stop paying attention, the pendulum will swing back with new acronyms and the same problems. Stay vigilant, but aim for balance.
So, less virtue signaling, more value creation, less campus cosplay, more equal opportunity. Look at us, finding common ground without a food fight. Somebody screenshot this before Daniel adds it to his corkboard. All right, we've marched through acronyms, grilled Wall Street, and poked enough fun at universities to get me banned from at least 3 alumni newsletters. But here's the deal. ESG going zero for 2025, BlackRock suddenly pretending it never heard of climate coalitions, and DEI offices either shutting down or slapping on new names. These are signals. The tide is shifting. So let's put a bow on it. What do these retreats really mean for America's workers, students, and economy going forward? Brian, I can already see you sharpening a told you so. Kick us off.
Here's the bottom line. This year proved that the market still has a backbone. When investors torch every single environmental proposal on the table, they're not just sending a message, they're sounding the alarm. People are sick of watching their retirement funds hijacked for social experiments. And let's be clear, it's not just about Wall Street portfolios. When you stop punishing reliable energy and start investing in it again, gas prices stabilize. When you quit choking small businesses with ideological nonsense, they can finally hire and grow. This retreat tells me that America is waking up to the reality that workers deserve paychecks, not pamphlets. The people building, hauling, welding, and farming, those are the folks who will benefit when we dump the gimmicks and get back to growth.
To me, the story of 2025 isn't just that ESG and DEI are retreating. It's that institutions are being forced to confront their credibility. Investors don't mind risk disclosures if they're real, but they'll punish performance art every time. Students don't mind fairness, but they'll reject bureaucracies that divide instead of unite. What's happening right now is a course correction, and it's badly needed. But here's my warning. If companies and universities just rename the programs and keep the same practices, the backlash will be worse next time. Reform beats rebrand, because reform earns trust. If leaders want to survive this cultural shift, they need to double down on merit, accountability, and real value. That's the difference between rebuilding credibility or losing it for good.
Everyone here is right about symptoms, but I want people to remember the system. ESG wasn't just a fad, it was an attempt to legislate culture through the back door. Couldn't pass it at the ballot box, sneak it into your portfolio. Couldn't enforce it in law, bake it into your loan requirements. That's what made this so dangerous. It bypassed democracy. The same goes for DEI in education. Bureaucracy became ideology enforcement under the guise of fairness. What we're seeing now isn't just a retreat, it's exposure. Lawsuits, state pushback, and public outrage ripped the mask off. But let's not get comfortable. If pressure fades, the same forces will regroup with a new label and the same mission. The fight doesn't end because the acronyms got unpopular. The fight ends when the power structures funding and enforcing them are dismantled or reformed for good.
Here's the thing, not every idea inside ESG or DEI was poison. Workers do face real risks from climate shocks, and students do face real barriers from discrimination. What killed these acronyms wasn't the goals, it was the excess. Companies tried to turn risk management into politics, and universities tried to turn fairness into ideology. That's why people lost trust. But if this retreat becomes a reset, we can salvage what matters: transparency in markets, fairness in schools, protections for workers. The danger isn't that ESG and DEI go away. The danger is that we throw out the good with the bad and leave real problems unaddressed. My final thought is simple: less grandstanding, more ground-level solutions. If leaders can stick to that, maybe we can rebuild trust and deliver outcomes that actually matter for ordinary people.
So here's where we land. The acronyms are retreating, the slogans are wearing thin, and for the first time in a while, reality has a fighting chance. But don't let anyone fool you. The fight isn't over. The same elites who pushed ESG and DEI will be back with new packaging, new buzzwords, and new pressure campaigns. That's the pattern. What matters now is whether Americans, workers, students, investors, families demand results instead of rhetoric. Rebuild the grid, reward excellence, protect fairness without the politics, and make sure markets serve people, not agendas. If we keep that pressure on, 2025 won't just be remembered as the year the acronyms retreated. It'll be remembered as the year common sense finally advanced. Remember to speak truth, stir thought,